We were wrong about Darth Vader's opinion on the clone troopers. Greetings again, lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. Not too long ago, we discussed why Vader had grown to hate the clone troopers following Order 66. In that holocron, we mentioned how Vader had questioned Commander Veal and the Jedi Purge, and wondered if there had been a similar contingency order for himself, which there was, Order 151. Based on that, we deduced that Vader had grown to deeply mistrust the clones and to avoid them. But we recently made a discovery that proves that notion terribly wrong. Although Darth Vader was mistrustful that the clones could betray him again, he actually continued preferring to work alongside them. And in actuality, he kept the 501st as genetically pure as possible. By 0 BBY, Vader's Fist was the last Stormtrooper division that was exclusively comprised of Fett clones. So in today's holocron, we are going to set the record straight, and talk about why Darth Vader continued to hold the 501st long after their expiration date, preferring the clones over the Stormtroopers. Let's begin. It may seem pretty obvious why Vader would want to keep his clones. Compared to the Stormtrooper recruits, they were elite soldiers with many years of wartime experience. But what may not be so obvious was how Vader's relationship to the 501st changed over time. With the knowledge that Vader insisted on keeping his own division Fett pure, we want to highlight his different approach in his combat style, because the clones of the Republic were not the same as the clones of the Empire. During the Clone Wars, Anakin's relationship to his troops was instrumental to many key victories. Rather than just being their commanding officer, he was their friend, and practically one of their brothers. Unlike other Jedi generals, Anakin would socialize and banter with his men, forming deep bonds with several of them. This is not to say that all Jedi treated their clones as disposable, but none cared more about preserving the lives of a clone trooper than Anakin Skywalker did. In fact, he was the trailblazer for clones being seen as real people by the wider Jedi. He disliked referring to the clones by numbers, as that made them feel too much like droids to him. Perhaps it reminded him too much of being a slave. And so Anakin insisted on not only calling each of them by their chosen nickname, but giving names to those that had none. And because he respected them so highly, the clones in turn deeply admired Skywalker. But of course, serving under General Skywalker had a mixed reputation among the clones. It meant receiving respect, but also putting your faith in Anakin. Anakin, who frequently executed some of the most bizarre and risky maneuvers in all of the Grand Army. One of the reasons Skywalker's tactics were so unconventional was to minimize the loss of life while keeping the enemy off balance. But because of the clones' experience and willingness to go along with it, Anakin placed more trust in them. On the part of experience, the 501st was one of the very first companies to get their boots on the ground. They were a part of the initial attack squad on Geonosis, so when other clones were a bit late to the party, Anakin had command of a division with live combat experience already under their belt. And due to both Anakin's command and their advanced skills, most of them survived all the way to the end of the Clone Wars, an insane feat. Even though Ki-Adi-Muadi's Galactic Marines were recognized as the most elite troopers, the 501st undoubtedly had the most wins under their belt. And when it came to their willingness to follow Anakin, he was deeply appreciative of it. He was someone that constantly questioned the High Council and was questioned by them. Whether it be his tactics, motives, or emotions, Anakin could never escape people trying to pick him apart. But the clones rarely ever did this. Instead, they trusted in Anakin's leadership even if it was a bit maverick. They didn't question him, but they did as they were told and they produced results. This was probably a massive relief to Anakin, and the reason he preferred being on the front lines of battle, because there, things were simple, results were simple, win or lose. Problems had tangible solutions, people did as they were told, and he wasn't constantly being scrutinized by the people around him. In the end, they of course participated in Order 66, being the company that executed Operation Nightfall on the great and grand Jedi Temple. Even in the face of betraying all of the Jedi, they followed Anakin without question, and when they were told to refer to him as Lord Vader, they obeyed that without question as well. The rapport that Anakin and the 501st had built with one another was invaluable, and could not be traded for anything. This sentiment carried over from Anakin to Darth Vader. The reason though, to their eyes, their commander was the only Jedi that had not betrayed the Republic, and for that reason, an ironclad loyalty was minted within each and every one of them. But with his change of allegiance came a change in both personality, command style, and his relationship with his men. One fact that should never be ignored: Anakin Skywalker operate very much as two different people. Anakin cared deeply for the lives of his men. Vader cared only for the loyalty of his men. Camaraderie took on a different meaning for Vader, especially when he got into his suit. In the novel The Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, we get a full view into Vader's mind as he struggles with his new body and his new life. During his first month in his suit, he is in tremendous pain and agony. He despises the helmet on his face, feeling as though he is barely even human. In this time, he received a strange sense of comfort when he was around the clones, now stormtroopers. He felt like he belonged among them. They too wore helmets which served as their faces. This was all in service to the Empire. Having this in common with his troopers made Vader feel at home with them. Vader also initially believed that they were the only beings that he could trust at the time. For several months, he would carry on the Jedi Purge with the 501st at his side, and they would take on the new name, Vader's Fist. But the Sith Lord did not banter with his men any longer. He only barked commands. He rarely employed Anakin's mind-bending tactics and favored displays of overwhelming force. He did not tolerate retreat and did not care whether the clones lived or died so long as they carried out his orders and achieved victory. Shockingly, this didn't faze the 501st at all. They had been given a renewed purpose under the Empire away from the Galactic Republic. That no longer existed. The clones admitted that they didn't mind killing civilians because it gave them something to do. And truthfully, it kept them from their worst fear, becoming obsolete. They had all been anxious about the ending of the war, worried about their lives, what they would become if they were to do nothing, if they were not able to achieve and to experience the thing that they were bred for, war. But under Darth Vader's leadership, they would always find a battle, even if at the end, it killed every single one of them. Failure to execute his orders exactly as commanded meant facing capital punishment. But for all of these reasons, the clones both loved and feared Darth Vader. They respected his iron-fisted approach. They were no longer held back and reached their full potential in service and duty to the Empire. Vader appreciated having people around that didn't question him or stifle him with foolish inquiries. Just like Anakin, who appreciated not being scrutinized by his men, Vader appreciated being in an environment with a hierarchy and a respect. However, a small issue gnawed at the Dark Lord's mind: Order 66. In Legends continuity, there was no inhibitor chips. The clones had voluntarily followed the indoctrinated loyalty to Palpatine. Because of this, Vader was suspicious that his men were not truly his. This is when he questioned Commander Veal after a mission one day, asking if a contingency existed similar to Order 66, but for himself. Veal could neither confirm nor deny the existence of such an order, but Vader understood that it did indeed exist. His clones were not as truly loyal to him as he believed. This of course shook his trust in them, and caused him to emotionally retreat even further within himself. But unlike what we had originally believed, this did not change his opinion on their duty overall. The Empire and everything in it belonged to Sidious. The Emperor had eyes everywhere, and any misstep that Vader made could cost him his life. This was the reality of the Sith, something that Darth Vader quickly understood and learned. The 501st also being in Sidious's pocket was just one more thing he had to look over his shoulder about. But it did not change how effective his personal division of the stormtroopers were. He continued commanding Vader's Fist for 2 decades, killing Jedi, oppressing worlds, and crushing all insurgencies. They continued to be the most effective stormtrooper division in the Empire. But problems soon emerged once again during the Kamino uprising. This event, which occurred in 12 BBY, would change the Imperial military forever. The Kaminoan cloners had secretly taken a piece of preserved Jango Fett DNA and cloned a private army of anti-Imperial troopers. Catching wind of this, the Empire dispatched the 501st led by the hired bounty hunter Boba Fett. Fett's intimate knowledge of the cloning facility he grew up in allowed the stormtroopers to infiltrate Tapoka City. There, a massive battle erupted between Vader's Fist and the anti-troopers, one that ended with the destruction of the Jango Fett DNA sample and the arrest of the insurgent cloners. But this was rare. This event actually shook Palpatine. Most importantly, it shook his faith in the cloning program. Already the program was showing its age, both figuratively and literally. While it was a preferred option for an elite army, it had a very high financial cost which Palpatine wanted to funnel into a new project, the Death Star. But also he feared that the clone uprising could spread like a disease throughout the Imperial military. Keeping genetically identical soldiers became a bad idea in his mind, so he terminated the Jango Fett cloning project entirely. Over the next few years, he introduced new clones bred from separate templates, and then soon enough, he moved on to organic recruits taken from the loyal citizens of the Empire, men and women that had grown up inspired by the heroics of the clone army. Many of the Fett clones were by now starting to get too old for service anyway. Their accelerated growth hormones were causing them to slow down in the field, and so many were moved to desk jobs or they became training sergeants for the new recruits. Their numbers dwindled, and the Stormtrooper Corps became diluted with other beings, much to the chagrin of the clones. But throughout all of his charge, Darth Vader never lost faith in his men. To him, there were no soldiers that could prove better than the experienced clones of the 501st. New recruits came in, but they quickly proved to be inferior to the super soldiers bred by the Kaminoans. Most of the clone drill sergeants were frustrated with the incompetence of the new stormtroopers, which was something that Darth Vader noticed. His men may have been much older, but they had experience and expert marksmanship to make up for any diminished stamina. And so, Vader's fist remained genetically pure, and within a few years, they became the last Stormtrooper division exclusively comprised of Fett clones, the same ones that had served Anakin Skywalker in the Old War. By now, the Dark Times reached a point where battles were few and far between. Vader was rarely sent out on conquest missions, and now only served the whims of the Emperor. The rebel insurgencies were treated as misbehaving children, rather than real threats worthy of elite soldier attention. The 501st was moved to being stationed on the Death Star. It was meant to be treated as a sort of honor guard position. After all, they retained the reputation of being the very best, so the Emperor wanted their skills as a security force for his greatest creation. And this was the time that Vader finally left the 501st behind, at least for several years. The clones found their Death Star stations to be terribly boring and unfulfilling, and unfortunately, they were wasted as guards, causing their skill to atrophy. But everything would change in 0 BBY, when both they and Vader were given a renewed purpose: the Rebel Alliance. The plans for the Death Star had been stolen, and it was Vader's job to get them back. With a mission finally worthy of attention, the Dark Lord raised his banner and called his valued men. Now back under Vader's command, the 501st felt reinvigorated. However, Vader was frustrated to find that his clones were not the elite commandos that they had once been. Their years of inactive guard duty had caused their already accelerated age to affect their performance in a way that it had not before. And for the first time, Vader was forced to break his rules on genetic purity. He combed the Stormtrooper Corps and hand-selected only the best out of each division to add to his own. But this just goes to show us how much Darth Vader valued the clones' performance. He was so used to their perfection that only the very best of any normal person could match these standards that he had set. The 501st continued to serve him throughout the Galactic Civil War. They were the company that captured the Tantive 4. They were present for the Battle of Hoth, and a small handful of them would even live beyond the Battle of Endor. And so, throughout all of his most important moments, Vader ensured that his clones stayed right by his side. He came to expect nothing less than the first-class performance set by Rex and the boys. Even the best of the Stormtrooper Corps only met the baseline standard for Vader's fist. That was because despite them ultimately being under the thumb of Palpatine, he could rely on them, which was something he could not say about the incompetent fools that now served the Empire. One day, I would love to get a novel or a few tales of animations focusing on Captain Rex fighting in the Rebellion. We have confirmation that he was present for the Battle of Endor, following Han Solo and Luke Skywalker as a member of their strike team. And on the Death Star, Palpatine mentions how several legions of his best troops have been placed on the Forest Moon. This implies that Vader's fist might be among them. That would mean that Rex would have found himself fighting against the 501st brothers in the ultimate final showdown. I'm frankly shocked that this is something that's been brushed over. But anyway, what do you think, my friends? I'm sure many of you suspected that Vader much preferred the clones over stormtroopers, but had you known that the 501st actually lasted so long? Until next time, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. May the Force be with you, and have a phenomenal day.